Welcome to the Chief's Catalyst podcast. All of this started from some conversations that I had about what we do in law enforcement, what we're doing as analysts, what we're doing to progress our departments and use technology, strategies, people to do our jobs better, faster, more efficiently, and keep people safe in different ways and better ways than before, all while also keeping in mind that we need to protect people's rights and be good stewards of the resources that we have. So, the title of this episode is The Business of Law Enforcement. The goal is to create a little bit of an understanding of how law enforcement, a public sector entity, operates like a business in the private sector, and the ways that we have to shift our thinking in order to capitalize on some of the lessons that we've learned from the private sector in order to communicate effectively, in order to meet our goals, in order to articulate success or areas that we're working to improve on. And like I said, really be good stewards of the resources that we have. So, all of this has started as me, a civilian analyst. I work for a local mid-sized police department. I support the office of the chief, and it's my job to manage technological project implementations, manage stratified policing, a data-driven approach to reducing crime and the stratification of accountability and responsibility throughout an entire department, but really to support, like I said, our chief and our mission to reduce crime and make the place that we work a safer place for our officers, for our citizens, and for the community as a whole. So I'd like to start out with discussing what the mission of law enforcement is. Well, overall, it's crime reduction, crime prevention, increasing public safety. Now, it could vary slightly depending on what your area of responsibility or your jurisdiction is. If you're a federal entity, you have very different responsibilities than us at the local level. If you're a chief for a railroad or chief for an ISD or a school district, your responsibilities or your priorities may look a little bit different than those of us that have a city or a concentric area that we're responsible for. We might have homes, you might not have homes, you may have only businesses, or your entire police department may be to protect a business, maybe like a railroad. So it could vary slightly depending on your area of responsibility, but overall, we want to reduce crime, we want to prevent crime, and we want to increase public safety. But some of these priorities could be delegated from elected officials or executive branches of government, or your individual chief's leadership and goals. Every chief has different priorities, different things that are important to them based on their experience, based on their knowledge, based on their partnership with the legislature, and what the elected officials want to see in their region. And so some of those goals come from there as well, and how we meet those crime reduction and crime prevention areas. So how do we achieve that mission? Well, number one, we do it through people, right? We have technically proficient officers, individuals, and people to help make sure that crime is reduced, crime is prevented, and people are kept safe. So it takes people. It also takes strategies. You can't go to war without a strategy, right? You can't go to work every single day and just say, well, whatever happens, happens. No, we have plans. We have responses specifically for how we're going to respond to an active threat incident, or working with the fire department, a structure fire, or a major accident, a fatality accident where we have to call out accident investigators and specialized personnel and equipment in order to address a certain problem. And that leads me to tools and technology. The third thing that I rely strongly on is the tools and technology, whether it's a weapon on an officer's duty belt or it's automated license plate readers. There are so many different tools and technologies that we provide to our officers, but how do we know if they're working, if they're using them, if we're getting the best return on investment, the best bang for our buck, or if what we're doing is working or not? So this brings me to our next point is, how do we measure success? Is it enough just to tell leadership? So if we're the chief, outside of us leadership, so town manager, city manager, director of public safety, or elected officials, is it enough just to tell leadership, hey, we've got people, we've got strategies, we've got technology, but we just need more to keep doing it better. We're good at this. We know what we're doing. Let us have more of what we're asking for. Just trust us and we'll take care of it. Is that enough to get an increase in your budget, an increase in your staffing, maybe personnel to do more of what you what you want to do? The answer, I think, is no. It's not enough to just do those things. We have to demonstrate that what we're using is actually working and is being that we're being effective with the tools and the resources that we have been given. This brings me to my next point: metrics. I the town that I work for, I've come to really appreciate our elected officials. And one of the things that I have learned from our mayor is that metrics are important. I had the opportunity to sit in a committee meeting the other day with some partners from the community. And after the meeting, the mayor got up and said, "This is great. We're making excellent progress. This is exactly what I want to see us do. But how do we measure if what we're doing has been successful? We've had 2 or 3 meetings. We've got an idea down. We've got some goals of what we're trying to do. But how do we know? What's the benchmarks to know that we have met those goals and we're actually doing what we started out to do by having this committee, for whatever committee it was for?" And so for us in law enforcement, often we fall back to crime statistics. As an analyst, right, crime statistics is often my bread and butter, right? This is what the crime is doing. This is what it isn't doing. This is how many numbers we had of domestic violence, assaults, robberies, burglary of a motor vehicles, shoplifting. Insert the offense here. But does those increases and decreases of criminal incidents actually demonstrate that what we're doing is working? Are there metrics that we can use? We can show increases and decreases of the number of incidents. We can show what we've been doing about them and whether or not our efforts have made any effect or any impact on them, or if they're just persisting and out of control. Another thing that we can look at is citizen generated versus officer generated activity. How much time are we spending addressing the problems that community members have brought to our attention versus proactive law enforcement? The other thing we can do is maybe enforcement reports. So counts of time spent in areas, so the amount of time spent in an area of concern, or the type of action taken, whether we took tickets or warnings, made any arrests or any field intelligence reports. One other unique metric is usage reports. So on how maybe a tool is being utilized. So the number of hours we spent using a LiDAR gun, the number of license plate reader deployments, if you have mobile license plate readers or license plate readers attached to your vehicles, or if they're fixed, the number of times that personnel use technology or a tool to solve a case or apprehend a suspect. Think of this like use of force statistics. We keep use of force statistics on every time we lay hands on a bad guy, every time we tase somebody, every time we point our weapon at somebody, right? That counts as a force being used, and we log it for whether it's our accreditation sake or our state mandates. But we log those things. Why don't we keep track of other things as well that we use in order to apprehend bad guys? Especially if it's something that you have a subscription for or that you pay lots of money for every year. Think about this example, maybe in the private sector. We've talked a little bit about, law enforcement is the public sector. And oftentimes we have this mindset of, well, just trust us. We're the law enforcement, we're the cops, we're the crime analysts, we have the experience. You just let us go enforce the law. You just give us what we need because we know what we need. But in the private sector, we would never see a sales director go into a board meeting or a shareholder meeting and say, "Hey, everybody, next quarter, we're going to do better. We're going to make everybody more money, and we are going to succeed next quarter," and then walk off the podium, right? They would always quantify how this would be achieved through the setting of goals and managing of expectations. They'd say, "Hey, this is how many new leads we anticipate to generate by doing these things," right? Listing out the steps they're going to take. We're going to achieve 30% more sales. We're going to go to 10 conferences. Our goal is to come away with 5 good leads at each conference out of the 400 people we talk to, and they'll give you an idea of what success will look like. Hey, we're planning to do $3 million worth of new revenue out of 50 clients, with 75% of those clients on 5-year recurring contracts. So they've given you what they want the finish line to look like and kind of how they're going to get there, so that when they come back at the next quarter or at the end of the fiscal year, they say, "Hey," did the shareholders or the stockholders say, "Did you do the things that you said you were going to do?" And you can resoundingly say, "Yes, here's the PowerPoint. Actually, we can just check down the list. This is how many conferences we went to. Here they are. Here's the proof. Here's the pictures we took. Here's the exact leads we generated at each conference." And here's how much revenue that we generated. Here's how many leads we did. Here's how it stacked up against our goals and expectations. So when thinking of law enforcement and the public sector as a business, we have to be able to do this same thing. Sometimes we have to then shift our mindset, shift our focus to have a similar mindset. So, how can we then use these agency metrics data to accurately depict what we in law enforcement are doing, how we are meeting our crime reduction or crime prevention goals, and how we can prove that we're being good stewards and can be trusted to continue doing so with the more people we're asking for, with the more tools we're asking for, with the more money we're asking for, whatever it is. So this is that change and shift in focus from trust us, we're the police, let us do our jobs and give us what we need to know. We know what we need to keep doing them. Shifting to here's how we've been good stewards of these resources we currently have and how we can effectively use more and different to enhance this crime prevention, crime reduction, and what you can expect from us when you say yes. So all of this, like I said, is a shift in our mindset and our focus. And when we do this well, we end up putting our legislature at ease, we put our elected officials at ease, and we're able to say, hey, you're business people that volunteer to help lead our community. Here's how we're going to meet your expectations and do what we say we're going to do. If you say that burglary of a motor vehicles is a problem or something that you're concerned with, then this is what we're actively going to do to identify where our BMVs are occurring, how they're occurring, what time of day they're occurring at, and what we're going to do to prevent them from happening. We would have our metrics there for how much time we spent doing BMV patrol. Did we do them in the areas that they were occurring at? And how many did we have this year as opposed to last year and the year before? Were we successful in doing that? Think too, if your agency subscribes or purchases license plate reading cameras every year, let's say you have 50 cameras, you spend $150,000 a year on those cameras. That's conservative. Maybe it's closer to 175 or 200, but the number there is a little bit irrelevant. Let's say that you spend $150,000 a year on license plate reading cameras. And the next year, you said you found success with them because you posted some stories on Facebook. You've told your legislature that, hey, the cameras are working. We're getting hits. Our hot list is enabling us to catch bad guys faster and better than ever before because now we know we've got eyes in the sky or we've got eyes out places keeping an eye on the community for us, being that force extension. But now we need more. Right? We want the newer version. We want the better version. We want live cameras too. We want ones that will capture our vehicle counts and speeds. We want this new drone thing, whatever technology product it is, right? We want more of it. Well, if you can go back and say, here's exactly how many times that we effected an arrest, how many times that we garnered a lead on a case, how many times we were able to stop a stolen vehicle, those begin to add up. And you can say, hey, we can justify the use of these systems. We can justify this $150,000 plus another $40,000 budget request because what we have has worked. On top of that, if you start to look for novel metrics like user reports, so how many of your users are logging in? Are all of the officers you've provided this to logging in and using it? Is it because they know how or they don't know how? Is it because they're required to and it's part of policy? But are we actually maximizing what we're paying for, right? Are we getting that return on investment? You would never, like I said, in the private sector, you wouldn't see somebody say, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. I just don't use that tool. No, if it's a tool that's going to get you more sales and make you more money, then absolutely, you would use that tool all the time, right? It wouldn't be a question about it. But if you don't capture those metrics, or if at least you don't use those metrics somewhere, it can be more difficult to justify asking for more of them. Once you've talked about some of these unique metrics, you could also talk about cost benefit analysis, or you could do a quick analysis of your people compared to your technology. So let's take the $150,000 a year of technology. On the low end, it may cost you around $150,000, $175,000 a year to outfit an officer with salary, benefits, and a percentage part of a vehicle, depending on how your agency does vehicles, whether they're shared on shift, whether they're take-home vehicles, whether all shifts use the same vehicle. You can say, hey, that $175,000 is going to be on the street X amount of hours. Out of all my people, each person roughly made, 25 arrests this year and took 300 reports. Maybe that's a lot. Maybe that's not. We're kind of making up numbers here. But if you can start to say, hey, these are the things that these people did compared to how much we were able to do with our technology, or what percentage of these cases or these incidents were impacted by our technology, you can easily go back to your legislature or your elected officials and say, what you've given us worked. We took the money that you've given us to steward. We've invested in these products, whatever the product is, and we have leveraged them to get our maximum benefit so that you see a return on investment with crime reduction, crime prevention, and increased public safety. We see a return on investment because we're catching bad guys, we're preventing crime, our officers are safer, our chief knows where everybody's at. But you're able to use these novel metrics to talk about how you're using your resources well. Like I said, all of this ties back, I think, to shifting our focus to law enforcement as a business. As a CEO, as a chief in your organization, you want your agency to do the best that they can with the resources that you have. And using the metrics that you have, or you may need to go dig a little bit and find, but novelly so, can help adequately demonstrate the effectiveness of them, that you're using them, and what you justify getting more of them in the future. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of The Chief's Catalyst, talking about the business of law enforcement and understanding how the public sector can operate like a private business, and how we can shift our thinking in order to capitalize on some of these lessons we learned from the private sector. If you liked this content today, feel free to subscribe to the channel, like our content, share it on your social media platforms. And if you want to talk more or have some questions about what we've talked about, please send us an email at catalystpodcast@proton.me.